So hello everybody and welcome to the latest installment of the Max Sport My Motivation campaign, and I am delighted to be joined by former Ireland head coach Joe Schmidt. Joe, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. Yeah, certainly enjoying the weather.
Yeah, for sure. Look, we're in June now, Joe. Like, it's kind of hard to believe we're in our fourth month when things have been different, I suppose, is one way of putting it. How have you found the last few months?
Yeah, it has been bizarre. I think it's been bizarre for everyone. It's the first time for any of us that we've ever had this sort of isolation, I suppose. But I've really enjoyed it. I've got the opportunity to spend time with my family. I saw my brother this morning for the first time in 3 months, and he lives just down the road. So it has been bizarre. And the one thing I would say is I feel that we're very lucky. There's a lot of people who have been hit hard by COVID-19, and we haven't. We've kept in our little family bubble pretty much, and actually enjoyed each other's company and enjoyed the weather, and we've used a bit of Max Sport equipment to stay in shape.
I'm actually curious about that. So, like, usually I'm talking to sports people and athletes, and we're talking about training and what they're doing and how they're keeping fit. But I very rarely ask coaches what they do to keep fit and training wise. So, what do you do?
Not a lot, actually, to be honest. I went for a bit of a walk yesterday for an hour. I've got a Kaiser bike here from McLaughl's, who obviously is Max Sport, and I would do the bike. I give myself an excuse to watch things like The Last Dance and a little bit of Netflix or a little bit of TV. There hasn't been a lot of live sport to watch, but I get on the bike, and whoever is on the bike is allowed the TV and whatever they want, whether it's Disney Plus or Netflix or whatever. So it's kind of like the big motivation to get on the bike.
That's a very good deal. Have you ever coached anyone that's like him?
Plenty of people who are quite like him, because they're super competitive. And Michael Jordan was super competitive. He wasn't necessarily popular with his teammates, and he had to isolate himself a little bit. You saw the crowds that would turn up for him, and they were going from country to country. And even when they did tours to different countries where you wouldn't think that he would maybe have the same level of popularity, he was still absolutely mobbed by crowds. So I guess he had to isolate himself a little bit. I don't think I've ever coached a player who's had to be isolated to the degree that a global superstar like Michael Jordan would. But having chatted with people like maybe Rory McIlroy, where he's very identifiable, and in Asia, in Europe, in America, South America. You don't have to be a real golfing nation to know who Rory McIlroy is. So I guess he's probably the closest to someone who's one of those global superstars, obviously world number one in golf. You would get that sort of attention, but Michael Jordan was world number one in basketball probably for a decade, and he was world number one in so many spectacular ways that it would have been really difficult for him at times.
If you had a choice now and you just look within rugby, who would you like to see a documentary like that made about? Is there anyone's life you'd love to sit back and go, oh yeah, I see that?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm putting you on the spot now.
Yeah. I suppose the most iconic player in recent Irish history is probably Drico, Brian O'Driscoll, and probably more has been written about him. I think one on Ronan O'Gara would be incredibly entertaining. Talking to Rog recently, he's got away with words. He is entertaining. I think Keith Wood might have been Player of the Year. That's a global thing. Johnny obviously was Player of the Year a couple of years ago. So those guys, I'd say Paul O'Connell would have been great. Just even to see, to go back and have a chat to him about his swimming and things like that as a kid, and how he developed that ultra competitive nature that he had.
Irish people are so fascinated by our sporting heroes. Is it the same in New Zealand? I mean, we're kind of a similar size, similar type country.
Yeah, I think you can magnify it even further for some of the feature All Blacks. You know, the guys like Richie McCaw. Richie McCaw hasn't played for the All Blacks for 4 years, but would still be in the news. I'd say once every couple of weeks, if he's doing a mountain kind of mountain walk, or he's doing a cycle, and he has been very good. He's done a lot of charitable things, so he does feature regularly. Dan Carter hasn't played in the country for a long time, but he features a lot. And probably the most often talked about player continues to be Jonah Lomu, because he was someone that was just entirely different and unbelievably entertaining to watch and unbelievably difficult to play against. Mike Catt, poor old Catty, he had to endure a bit of 1v1 versus Lomu, and that's a very difficult thing to win. But he's now here helping the Irish team, and I'm looking forward to watching his players go out there and do a really good job and shut down anyone else who looks a bit like Jonah, who comes from the Southern Hemisphere.
He certainly made a lasting impact on the rugby world. So, Joe, if we just look at this time now, like, you're obviously not coaching right now, but how difficult would it be for a coach to try and stay connected with their team and, to try and keep them motivated and work with them and look ahead when the future is so uncertain?
Yeah, I think one of the really good things, Marie, is there is a little bit of certainty around the future. August 22 has been talked about a lot as a starting point, and I think once players get that, it gives them a little bit more motivation. And people like Jason Cowman and behind the scenes who do the physical conditioning and the physical conditioning staff in the provinces, they can start to work back from that to get players ready to play at that stage. And if those first couple of weeks are derby games, and then get in and finish a bit of Pro 14 playoffs and European playoffs, and hopefully get some test matches, I think player motivation skyrockets very, very quickly. Had a text chat with Johnny Sexton this morning, and he's never lacked for motivation anyway, but his motivation is still very high, and it's for players like Johnny and a fair few others. It's actually given them a great window to get themselves into physical condition and get over any bumps and bruises and injuries that they had. So I'm really looking forward to seeing a little bit of live sport here in Ireland. It's starting in New Zealand, in 2 weekends' time with Super Rugby Aotearoa. And I think that's going to be an exciting competition, because it's going to give us some live rugby to watch at least.
What time will we have to get up to watch it, Joe?
Not even that early. I think most of the games tend to be played at 7:35 p.m. New Zealand time, which is 8:35 in the morning. And, Marie, you will have done your exercise by then. You'll be back from your jog, and you'll be able to sit down and have some breakfast in front of it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to be adopting your mantra now. Whoever's on the bike gets the TV. So it'll be rugby for.
Yeah.
Do you feel that we are all going to kind of appreciate it a little bit more, because, like, nobody could have ever envisioned that at any stage that we would be in a situation where we'd go months without any sport? It's just the strangest thing.
Yeah, and there's only so many replays you can watch, and I think that's where things like some of those documentaries. There's some great documentaries. The Ali one. I see there's all sorts that are available now, as well as obviously the Michael Jordan one. But I substituted a little bit of live sport with watching that sort of thing. But we resorted to board games and card games, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was a great time to spend with the family. I've read quite a bit. I've caught up on a bit of reading that I wanted to do anyway, that books that interested me in personal growth, and also books that just are entertaining. couple of Michael Connolly's and John Grisham's and Lee Child books that I sort of had stored away and hadn't had time to read. So, it's been great weather for sitting outside and reading a book for an hour.
So you're at home and you have the kids there. Do you ever kind of get tempted to coach them?
I don't think they'd accept coaching. My oldest son Tim, he's an accountant now, so he's commandeered the office, and he's still working office hours and working quite hard. I would have coached him a bit when he was young, mostly in hockey and cricket, because I tried to stay out of his rugby way. But certainly his kicking and passing, we spent a lot of time at the park working on. My youngest one, Luke, unfortunately he's pretty limited in what he can do with his epilepsy, and he's actually had a couple of rough days recently. So for him, it's just about minding him. And my daughter has been working so hard for her radiography exams that she hasn't really had a lot of time to do much else. But she's pretty sporty, and she and probably half a dozen of her friends get online with Zoom, and they have to come up. They have 2 exercises each, and they do a little workout themselves, and and really enjoy, I think, the interaction, albeit remotely.
They must be so happy to have you around now, because anyone who's involved in sport, professional sports, knows that it can be all consuming.
Yeah, I think sometimes even when I was around, I wasn't necessarily present. And I think that's something that it's one of the reasons why I gave up. I think you run out of energy as well, because it is very much all consuming. So it's allowed me to re-energize myself, but also to reintroduce myself and to actually be present when I am, playing board games or playing card games with the kids, or even if we're just sitting down watching a movie. It's been really enjoyable.
Are you getting kind of eager now to get back and do something else, or are you happy with the existence that you have now?
I don't. While I've got no choice about it, I try not to think too much about it. There's been some good opportunities, and I've spoken to some people who've made contact about potentially going and doing some things, and I have been doing things. I've been working with a group, Richie Gray, who's in Scotland at the moment. He's kind of been the hub of our World Great Breakdown group. And while there were no law changes, the guidelines around the laws, we've just been trying to work through those with myself and Wayne Barnes, Ian Foster down in New Zealand, and Lyndon Bray, who's in charge of the Southern Hemisphere referees. So that's been a lot of work, working through that, and doing little bits and pieces with people in business that I know and do a bit of work with.
You sound very content with what you're doing and kind of right now, but like, can you picture yourself like, back sitting up in the coach's box, like putting on your gear, heading off to training again, being in charge of a team, planning out matches? Is that something that you see for yourself, or can you just say, I've done that?
Yeah, I can't say I've just done that, but I can see the other as well. I did a few weeks there with Claremont just before the lockdown. I'd really just got back into the country, and we got locked down. So I really enjoyed that. I sat up in amongst the coaches. Franck Azamar, the coach, was on ground level, which is pretty common in France, and you can't really see a lot. But it was really just, I was just giving feedback to the coaches. I wasn't coaching the team, but yeah, you do. You look at it and you think, oh, I'd love to take this at training or do this at training, and I enjoyed it. I think I did run out of energy, and I did, I think you get a little bit used up, but you do get refreshed. And being locked up for 12 weeks, I think that's an easy way to refresh yourself.
I just always feel like anyone I know who's a coach, they're kind of a coach forever. They just never stop being a coach. It's just so inherent and such a big part of them that they can't stop.
No, it probably is a little bit like that. I watch rugby on TV and I think, oh, if he just done this, or if he gets better at that, or something like that. And sometimes I will myself not to think about an influence I might try to have if I was coaching a team, and just purely enjoy the game. But I think when you've been as emotionally connected as I have been for 20 odd years of professional coaching, it is a little bit tough to make a super clean break. So having dabbled a little bit, helping Claremont, and I really enjoyed going down and taking a session for Terranura, and taking a couple of sessions at St Mary's with Steve Hennessy and his crew, and going to Old Belvedere, taking a session. That the players are fantastic. And it's genuine amateur rugby that that is played for the love of the game, and I thoroughly enjoy getting down and just so that fills a space for me. Obviously not as visible or financially rewarding, but certainly rewarding anyway.
So if we look at the future of rugby, and there are a lot of discussions going on, there's a lot of commentary around what would be the best way for rugby to proceed in terms of an aligned global calendar. What are your thoughts on it?
I think it has to come, Marie, at some stage, an aligned global calendar. I guess one of the problems with that is it's like trying to get world unity on things. Everybody has, a position that they want to protect. And, the Six Nations is ring-fenced, and it's ring-fenced because it is the financial engine that drives professional rugby at Test match level in the Northern Hemisphere. So those Six Nations, that they don't want to relinquish the security that they have, and at the same time, the Southern Hemisphere, they play in the Rugby Championship with 4 nations. They don't have the same economies of scale that the Northern Hemisphere have, so they want to integrate a little bit more. And I think if you had, even if it was biannually, a global test match champion, I think it'd be a lot better indicator of the best team than the World Cup, which is such a small glimpse of, on the day, whoever's the best on the day. And that's part of the allure of it. I think it's a great competition, but this would have probably a little bit more credence than the world rankings as well, which everyone finds a little bit hard to understand. They can understand when one team beats another team, and then they play off to see who's the best team. And so hopefully for both clubs and for test matches, there can be worked out the best way to have that global calendar.
When you hear Philip Brown talking about how catastrophic this layoff can be, and how important it is to get support. We see what's going on in Rugby Australia. They've laid off a third of their workforce. It's, you can look all around the world and you'll have stories about what a difficult situation the sport of rugby is in. How worried are you about the future and the impact that this will have? Because I think right now we're only starting to hear about the consequences of what's gone on over the last few months with there being no rugby played. Yeah,
the consequences are going to ripple for quite some time. I think at the moment there are clubs and national bodies who are burning through financial resources they don't really have, because they're keeping staff on, playing staff on, and there is no income. So when you've got no income and you've got outgoings, that's unsustainable. But in the longer term, I think the Irish model has been incredibly sustainable. I think they've done an incredible job keeping their best players, the vast majority of them. And I'd like to think that can be something that can be solid again in the future, because as soon as we can get things back underway, I think those revenues will reignite the engine, and I think it can continue as it was before. Maybe certainly in the short term, some of the player contracts won't be what they were in the past. Some of the ceilings for player salaries may be lowered a little bit. I know they're talking about it in the Premiership. They're certainly talking about it in France as well. So if those salary caps come down a little bit, and everyone obeys those salary caps, then it may not be as lucrative for the player as it once was, but it will still be quite lucrative. And I think then it will regather momentum and things will reinflate over a period of time.
And just before I let you go, Joe, if there's anybody who has time in their hands and they're in their back garden and they want to get better at rugby, what should they be doing right now? How should they be using this time?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways is just to carry a ball with you all the time. And I know that might drive some parents to distraction as kids carry it through the house. But I think one of the things that I notice with kids who are really, I suppose, skill efficient, is that the ball was like an extension of their arm, their hand, and they were very comfortable with the ball, so they could work the ball and get torque on the ball and pass the ball and drop the ball onto their foot. It all became a lot simpler. So depending on the size of your garden, obviously, if you've got a large yard, you might be able to start chipping the ball and using a little bit more kicking. But for most, my sons and I were out, we were just passing the ball around, playing simple game like donkey, and more laughing than anything else. And you had to do a few trick passes that weren't necessarily very efficient. And we haven't got a big garden, but it's big enough for 3 people to pass in a triangle and have a bit of fun.
I always remember reading about Tyke Furlong, and his mum was saying that she'd be washing the dishes at the kitchen sink, and he'd be tackling her from behind. That he was just constantly at it.
Yeah. Well, I see he was kind of on a bit of a Leinster podcast there on the farm. I think a little bit of the time he was trying to hide from his dad, so he didn't actually have to do any farm work. And he'd set up a bit of a gym in a disused cow feeding yard, and so he had a little gym there, and I'd say he'd keep himself in pretty good shape. And he's a heck of a player, and he's hilarious to be around. So I'm pretty sure his mum didn't find it hilarious as she got hammered from behind, but hopefully she was able to stay on her feet and bat him off a bit.
So Joe, just very finally now, what are you looking forward to most? We have a bit of an idea of what the calendar is going to be like over the next few months. What's that date, that one big game that you just can't wait for?
I'd love to see the Six Nations finish off. I just thought that Ireland were in such a good position, and I felt with France getting the red card and only have a 6-day turnaround, I thought it was kind of set up for Ireland to maybe get a win there, and then they'd only have to get a good win against Italy and be in a bit of a race with England to win the championship. And the other obvious big game was Saracens versus Leinster in that quarterfinal of Europe. So I think if those 3 games can be played, I'd very happily sneak along if you're allowed a crowd, and if you're not allowed to be there as a crowd, I'd certainly be watching them on TV.
For sure. Look, I think everybody is excited about any sort of sport coming back anyway. Joe Schmidt, former Ireland head coach, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Marie.